I'm getting excited about this interview, I'll tell you that. Wow. Wow.
Your first book was rejected by 31
publishers, yeah. But I had to change Alex from, instead of being a black man, they wanted to be a white guy. And I said, no, not doing it. He told me the Epstein story. I said, this is insane. This is, I mean, this billionaire and all these young girls, and I want to write a book on it. Probably the most important thing, weirdly, is understanding that I could love another person at that level and that I was lovable. My father, the only time I remember him giving me a hug was on his deathbed.
Show all the cameras.
Is this all, it's none of this is usable? We haven't even started yet?
Hello.
All right, hey. We're here, you're here.
Wait, what is all that?
That's just notes, man. I don't know if I'll ever use them, but yeah, yeah, who knows. I saw this, sometimes now on CNN they'll do this, people have the notes in front of them, right? And I have Maggie when I forget somebody's name. What's Sue's name again?
Yeah, right.
Sue, yeah, right. Now this is so weird though, like 5 cameras, which is perfect for me because I'm a multiple split personality. So this is the Jimmy camera and the James camera, and this is the Claude camera, and this is the Malcolm camera, okay, for all my splits.
So I wanted to start talking about the #1 dad book.
Oh, good,
you're
good, yeah.
Talking to a soon-to-be father. This is one of the final interviews I'm doing for this season before my wife delivers in July. But I'm curious, like, why did you decide to write it?
You know, I looked around and I just see so many guys are in trouble, they're lost, they're overwhelmed, they're not the breadwinners anymore, they don't know where they fit in, you know, and that affects in a negative way their ability to be dads. And I just think it's probably the most important thing you do is to actually be a pretty good father. And the subhead for this book is how to be the best dad you can be in 1 hour. And the importance of that is that for a lot of these guys, they're not going to read the 400-page book. I don't know if you have or you haven't, but a lot of dads will not. They just won't read it. And this thing gets at just stuff that will be helpful. And a lot of dads, they don't have anybody to talk to. They'll go out with their friends and they won't talk about being a dad or being a father. They'll talk about football and whatever, cars, et cetera, et cetera. My father, the only time I remember him giving me a hug was on his deathbed. And that was a little bit the way a lot of dads were in that age, but still so we have a page on just hugging and how important it is.
And why? I was going to ask you about that in a couple other
Because,
parts.
I mean, with my father, you know, I mean, it wasn't useful in terms of us being close. And I have one of my good friends, still a good friend from college, and I was at his house one night, and his 2 boys both played football. So we all had dinner, and then the boys were heading out the door. And my friend said, where do you think you're going? You come over here. And he made them both give him a hug before they went out for a Friday night to go mess around. And that was a lesson for me. And so with our son, Jack.
What was the
every
lesson?
time, the lesson was, for me, every time Jack comes, he gets a hug. When he was a kid, drop him off at school, he gets a hug. And he's fine, he was cool with it. You know, and I think, so that's just one little piece. One of the things about the book, and I do think that anybody who's watching, any woman, whether it's a wife, a mother-in-law, a grandmother, especially mother-in-laws, you know, give this thing to these guys, because this to me is a good deed. I won't make any money on this thing. This is I don't know, because I'm going to make sure it works. So I'll spend whatever I have to do to make sure that we get the message out there so people are aware that this exists and what it is. Which is just this very, very helpful thing about consistency, why consistency is important as a dad. You know, in sports, if you're a referee and it's a college basketball team, if there isn't consistency in the way you make the calls, it's a disaster. Dads need to be consistent, and because consistency builds trust, and you need to have some trust. So that's a piece of it. Listening is huge. Listening. We guys are not necessarily the best listeners in the world. That's really, really important. You see me blabbering here, so you can tell, you know. No. What kind of a listener would I be? No, I think pretty good, you know, because if you meet Sue, she's She's strong wife in a good way. My thing about Sue is if Sue ever leaves me, I'm going with her.
And you can't have success in your role without being a good listener. But something else you wrote about in the book was the importance of reading to your kid, and then at 4 or 5 years old, making sure the kid starts reading to you.
Yes.
Why?
Yeah. Well, because trust them. At a certain point, like with Jack, when Jack was, I think, 5 months old, Sue threw him in the swimming pool. Boom, there you go, dude. Sue's a big swimmer.
A collegiate
My
swimmer.
wife, she's an all-American swimmer. That's irrelevant. But the thing was, go in the pool, we knew it would be okay, and we're right there, and we pull him out, and he's used to water from, being in the whatever, But this thing about there's a certain point you got to, push them, be able to say no to them, and that doesn't mean you don't love them. I mean, that's one of the problems with some parents. They're afraid to say no because they won't be with my friend. Yeah, they will be. But listen to their stories. Tell them your story. Who are you? What's the deal? What do you stand for? What are your values? What are your as they get older? Stuff like that. So, but the whole thing here is to engage with guys, and especially because for a lot of them, they don't have anybody to engage with. And all through the book, it's continually saying, if this doesn't make sense to you, just go to the next page. Because some of the stuff you're not going to buy into. You might not be a hugger. Okay, that's fine. Saying I love you. A lot of guys have trouble saying I love you. And the book helps you to practice a little bit. And you may not be able to do that. Fine, go to the next page. But at the end of it, 1 hour, and I think this is a promise that it's a guarantee I could make. If you read this book in 1 hour, you will be a better dad. You'll be a better partner too. And I think that's useful.
You said life is a game where you're juggling 5 balls. All but work are made of glass. Explain that.
This comes down to, and actually it's my Alice Cross novels are all about balancing a very tough job with your life at home. That's what he does. I mean, he's got this ridiculous as a homicide detective, and then he has to go home and take care of the kids. There's the thing on Amazon now, they've with Cross. And one of the beauties of the actor Aldous Hodge is he's really intense out there as a detective, and then he's really great with the kids. So it really works as a TV show. But similarly with us, we need to learn to balance, and that reality of it is yes, work is it's not as important as we make it out to be. It is important, but there are more important things. And as you get older, I think you begin to realize that a little bit. You'll probably.
It's funny for you to say though, because you have, worked your ass off. The entirety of your life and your time commitment.
One of the things I say in the book, and I was very careful not to make the book about me or about Jack or about Sue and Jack and I, but the one thing I do say is that I read everything I could read. So I did the reading for you, and I talked to hundreds of dads. Had I done that before we had Jack, I would have been a better dad. Guaranteed.
Really?
Guaranteed, absolutely.
What would you have done differently?
I think I would have been more present. I mean, I was here because I work at home, so I was around Jack a lot, but I could have been more present. I could have been more open to doing stuff like, okay, I don't like to go like the Galapagos Islands and stuff like that, but I could have and I should have. I think I would have pushed him a little bit more in terms of sports. We kind of let him find his own way, and he had it in his head that he wasn't a good athlete. Maybe Sue sort of intimidated him being a great athlete.
I read in one article you said he enjoyed cooking more than golf.
Yeah, and that's fine. And that's another thing with kids. You kind of have to let them. Yeah, that's fine. That's cooking. And one of the things with Jack is I never say I'm proud of him. I say I'm happy for you. Proud of them sometimes means they're doing what you want them to do. Oh my God, I always wanted you to be a writer. He's not a writer, he's in finance. Not the ideal career that I would have picked, but he's happy doing it, so I'm happy for him. And I think that's useful too. A lot of it is just, you think, and guys, they don't think about it as much as they ought to. You're probably starting to think about it.
I probably should be thinking about it more, but I just find terrifying. You know.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly change is terrifying. Change is difficult.
Right.
Change is difficult.
But that doesn't mean bad. I mean, change is
no.
often
No,
great.
I think, and most guys and women, they're not prepared for the bond that winds up with them and this little baby. It's stunning, kind of, like, oh my God,
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about
or babies, who knows? Is it a baby or babies?
one, a
One.
boy,
Only
son.
one. Only one.
Hopefully two in the future. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about your parents.
Yeah.
Though, and we can start with your dad, since you've already touched on that a little bit.
Yeah.
You said before that you never felt you truly knew who your dad was. Why?
He had a difficult upbringing. He grew up in the Newburgh poorhouse, which was essentially where, it wasn't homeless in those days, but his mother was a charwoman there. She took care of the kitchen, so cleaned up the bathrooms, the kitchens, or whatever, and they got a room in the basement. So he came from that. He never really experienced his father. His father, I don't know, I don't think he was a very nice man. He took off when my father was very young.
And your dad had the opportunity to meet his dad, but chose not to.
Well, my father, just before he was going off to World War II, he got a call, and this guy said, "My name is George Hazelton. I live in Port Jervis," which was about 20 miles away from Newburgh, where we lived. And he said, "Just bear with me for a couple of minutes." He said, "Last night my parents took me downstairs after dinner, and they said, 'George, you're going off to war, and we have to tell you we're not your natural parents.'" And then over the phone, the man on the phone, George Hazelton, said, "I'm your brother." That's how my father found out your brother. They both survived the war, and a couple of years later, my uncle calls again. He says, "I found our father. He's tending bar in Poughkeepsie," like Gene Hackman and French Connection, picking your nose in Poughkeepsie. And he said, "Let's go see him." And my father said, I don't want to meet him. I don't want to meet him." So my uncle went. My uncle was kind of a shy guy. He went up, and a little bar under the bridge in Poughkeepsie. And here's behind the bar is who he's never met to his knowledge, his father. And he sits there. My uncle doesn't drink, so he has a Coke. And 20 minutes he watches this guy. He's so turned off by this guy, he never introduces himself, he just leaves. I do not know my grandfather's first name. Well, I do know it now, but I didn't know it until a couple of years ago. His name was Robert, but I didn't know it.
So what about all of that do you think prevented you from knowing who your dad truly was?
I think he kept everything inside. He really kept a lot inside. He was an interesting guy. He never hit any of us, ever. But he would grab us, and he had these powerful hands. Just grabbing, but never struck anybody. So I think we were a little scared of him. My sister, one of my sisters, had a sort of a gathering for him after he died, maybe about a month later. And I'm sitting with my sister, and it's a lot of people he had worked with. He was at Prudential, their headquarters in Boston. And we're listening to all these people raving about my dad and what a cool guy he was and neat and funny and all this stuff. And my sister looks at me and she goes, "Who are they talking about?" Because we never saw that guy.
Why not?
I don't know.
And as I understand it, he would have liked to have been a diplomat or an author.
Yeah, no, he's a very bright guy. Very bright guy. And I think it's hard to be courageous. It's hard to step out, especially in those days. The idea, and then my mother got pregnant with me, but he was going to go to Georgetown and do graduate studies. And then I came along, and that was the end of that. And then he drove a bread truck for like 6 years.
What would you have liked to have known about him?
I think, in his later years, we got closer, and we would talk. 2 or 3 times a week on the phone and stuff. And I go up there and meet him and stuff. So, see he and my mother. I would have liked to have gotten to that point earlier. He was very competitive with me, which is kind of bizarre. I remember we had this long driveway in the country, and when I'm little, and he used to once a year he'd want to race me, and when I finally got I was around 12 and I was going to kick his butt, and he just kind of elbowed me off the road. He wasn't going to lose, And if we would play golf, If he was losing on the 18, he'd say, okay, we'll wipe out the scores. It's all about this hole. So even if he was behind 4, we were only going to count the 18th hole. So he didn't like to lose.
And did you care?
I was okay. Not a lot. I'm not competitive that way. I mean, people
you said that before.
Because I'm not. That's not my deal. And people always if you are, and I've noticed this with interviewers or journalists, whatever they think and feel, they have to assume that other people feel the same stuff. I don't. That's not the way I'm wired. The way I'm wired is I'm writing a book. I want it to be the best book I can write. Whether it becomes number 1 or number 10 is not. It's just not a thing in my life.
Fine, but I would assume.
When I go out golfing, like you met my friend Mike Lupica, we don't compete.
I would assume you're the exception, though, as opposed to the norm.
I don't know.
In terms of the uber successful and the lack of.
Yeah, I don't know. One thing you'll hear over and over and over again is that athletes in particular, they remember the losses more than the wins.
Right.
And you just hear it again and again and again. I don't even think about the losses too much. I tend never to look backwards. I'm always like, okay, what's the next book? What's the next thing? I'm going to talk to somebody. I do these interviews on Substack, and I really enjoy them. They're like half an hour, but because I'm meeting somebody.
Right.
It's kind of cool. So this is cool. I'm finding it interesting to meet you and how you do what you do and the questions and all. And I find that stimulating. Believe it or not.
I was going to say.
Is this working? Do you think he gets buttered up? I don't know.
They're the ones that edit it, so they're the ones that need to be buttered up.
Okay.
Your mom, what would you say is the role she played in your life?
She was the mom. She was the home. I mean, not to be, but this is the reality of her. She was the homemaker. She was to make the meals and, kind of push you a little bit. Nobody pushed me that much academically because I did well in school, so that was never a deal with them. I mean, their only thing, and it wasn't really joking, oh, you got a 97, why didn't you get a 99? I don't know. I got something wrong.
And they
cut me some slack.
But they were hard on you in that way?
Not to, no.
Okay, because when
it was sort of kidding, but it wasn't total kidding. My grandmother was the key figure for me.
Okay, question for you though before asking about her. You said before your parents had a bit of a drinking problem.
Yeah. Functioning alcoholics kind of thing.
How do you think?
Nice people, good people. And the thing is, I did therapy for 1 year, and it was great. I just was very lucky, the guy that I met. In fact, he died this year, and I hadn't seen him in 20 years. His wife called to just tell me how much, just our relationship. We would go then have lunch every once in a while after I stopped seeing him. And we just became friends.
What about that touches you a bit?
Oh, it's great. I mean, the fact that I meant that much to him. Dr. Marcuse, great guy. Really, really, really good guy. But with him, I did, if I had a little chip on my shoulder, that's my dad, that's not me. Like if you get mad at a cab and you go, well, that was kind of, why would I get that mad at the cabbie? And that's my dad, because he would get angry. And it helped me to get past that.
How?
But also not to blame him, because I understood what it was. And I could go, okay, that's my dad. And then not to blame him for it. It was okay. There was a lot of reasons, things that made him the way he was, and that's okay. He's my dad, and and I love him. I wish that we had developed that earlier, but
What were the tools that therapy gave you that when you feel yourself getting to that place?
Tools for my journey?
Yeah,
I don't know. Journey is a word, I'm not a journey guy. But
no, but I mean, the year in therapy had to teach you something that you were able to recognize.
I think it's understanding. Okay, that's not you. It's not logical. That's not really who you are.
Because you would get angry.
Sometimes. It just like, that's stupid. Why would I get that angry at a cab driver? I mean, I don't know why that particular image, but the guy, he made a mistake. It's like Oklahoma, where he made a little mistake. I don't care.
But I mean, good for you for recognizing that at the time and finding the tools to then solve it so it doesn't continue.
It's better.
Coming out
it's
later
better.
on.
It's better.
You mentioned your mom's mom, your grandma.
Yeah.
You started to talk about the impact
Oh no, she was. Yeah, she was it. She's the one. Look, I think it's really useful, and I don't know about your life, but to have somebody who really believes in you.
What did your grandma do that helped in building your confidence?
Just belief, just constant belief, and she would never, like, oh, you got an A- or something. That wasn't her gig, and she had this line, hungry dogs run faster, and that was her thing about, just go out there and chop wood. Don't worry about it. Go, just write the damn book.
Yeah.
Writer's block, no, there's no writer's block. Go write the book. Just write it. You have the gifts, you can, whatever you want to do within reason. Although she told me, you're not going to play in the NBA. What?
Well, you were pretty into basketball.
Well,
at the time,
was.
so.
I was totally into basketball, and I was this height when I was 12.
Uh-huh.
So I was a scary Little League pitcher because I was like 6 foot. And at 12, in those days especially, you didn't have a lot of 6 foot pitchers looking down at you and trying to hit you, Or basketball, same thing at 12, 6 foot. It's, oh, okay, and you're a center, but eventually you're going to have to become a guard because 6 foot centers don't work.
And you were, I think, the home run leader 2 years in a row in Little
we
League.
had, and that was important to me. But the weird thing, like when I was 10, I didn't make the Little League. And that was heartbreaking, and it was crazy too. I should have, but I don't know what the hell it was all about. But I did, and that really, it's funny how certain things will stick with you. Certainly, I can remember that scene. I can remember walking off that field and being heartbroken in Little Newburgh. And then like the next year, I'm like, home run champion. So I don't know what the hell that was all about, but
Growing up,
Yeah.
You were doing really well in baseball, obviously, but what was it about basketball that made it your passion?
I don't know exactly. It's a little like golf in the sense that with golf, every once in a while you can hit a shot that's as good as any pro can hit. And like you can never hit a ball out of Yankee Stadium, and you can't slam dunk. But in golf, you can. And in basketball, I think where it really came out in a big way are like Steph Curry, and the long shots, and then Caitlin Clark, similarly. So so I could hit 25 footers and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing, that flight of the ball and swish, and cool. So I just aesthetically, I always loved it. I could dunk. Which little white guys couldn't dunk in those days. So I could dunk for one summer, and then I screwed up my knees, so that was the end of the dunking.
How was that, though?
Dunking was great. Screwing up, it was okay, And we had good teams junior and senior year in high school, and that was the end of the basketball thing.
How did you once get your nose broken and 2 teeth knocked out?
I just being in the wrong side of an elbow. Yeah. That was the beginning of my junior year in high school.
Why did you know you always wanted to get out of your hometown?
I think a piece of it, and it's funny, like I still have friends. One of my birthday parties, I invited like 25 people I still maintain relationships, 2 or 3 from my hometown, high school friends, a couple from college, some from work, blah, 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 blah. And I maintain these
Got them
relationships.
great gifts too, right?
Got them good gifts. Yeah.
Which were what?
Oh no! That was a different birthday.
Different party. Okay,
Yeah. No, there were no gifts for this one.
Okay.
But it was just great getting together with these people, and I'd maintained the friendships. Some of the friendships, kind of go away because the people change so much, or you change so much, and there's no longer any kind of a. You just have you go back and kind of relive, past experiences and stuff. But the current stuff doesn't work so much. Where was I?
Yeah, so I was asking why you always knew you wanted to get out of your hometown.
I think that I just looked around and I said, my parents' life is not for me. Everything I see around here, my relatives, it's just not for me. I don't want to live in this town. This is not where. And it's nothing wrong with the town. It's Newburgh's an interesting town. Tough town. Really tough town.
What was it that made it not for you, though, you think, at the time? Like, what was it that you were conscious of?
The aspirations, the possibilities, the ways you could work. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to.
Your friends thought you did.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess because that was what their view of what you would aspire to. But I didn't, I didn't want to be in particular a lawyer. I'd never be a doctor because I'm blood, which is weird, writing all my mysteries and stuff. But I'm not a big. I would faint in the operating room. That would be bad.
What was it that made you aware of school being the avenue to?
It was just obvious. A lot of things to me are just obvious. One of the things, and I guess it's the biggest strength I have is to be able to really focus on what the heart of it is. And in terms of the novels, when I do the outlines, every chapter, I know why this chapter is useful. I know what the heart of it is. I know what any situation I can kind of get to. Here's what we need to do to make this work. I do a series of nonfiction with Matt Eversman. Matt was the actual sergeant who was portrayed in Black Hawk Down. I think you might have talked to Matt. He's a great guy.
Yesterday. Yeah.
Great guy. Matt is just a spectacular guy.
And thinks the world of you.
Oh, and I think he's a great guy. And but I saw Matt do some interviews with combat guys, and the title came right to my brain, Walk in My Combat Boots. I don't know why, but the idea of, and our mission with that book was that if you'd been in combat, you would say Eversman and Patterson got it right. And if you're one of these people that BS's, that you understand things that you don't understand, you would read that and go, I had no idea about the military. So you would really, and those books, you learn something about them. But in terms of the problem solving and getting to the heart of it, I knew Matt was a great interviewer. And he would get, especially in the combat area, he would get men and women to talk about who had been through it. And they don't necessarily want it, but he would be able to get them to talk about it. But then the trick is you got these 40 and 50 page interviews. And the problem solving thing was, okay, we're going to take these and we're going to turn them into 5 or 6 page chapters. We're going to take the interviews and we're going to condense them so that you have a feeling for the individual and you get 1 or 2 of their best stories. And that makes the whole thing interesting to read because the interviews would be deadly, in my opinion. It would just be, oh my God, But it's that kind of problem solving. We went out and did a.
But so you're saying, and I'm going to get to kind of your process and writing coming up. But I mean, basically, what you're saying is, even at an early age, you could
look at this thing and go, "This is
get
not
to the problem."
Yeah, this is not for me. I'm not sure if I understood exactly what was for me because after Newburgh, my family moved to Lexington, Mass. And then I was working in a mental hospital, and I had not been. I was a good student, but I wasn't a big reader, and school didn't work for me. High school, I was very good at it, but it just no, this is boring. I don't like it. I don't agree with a lot of stuff. I hated it.
Well, except
I hated school all the way through.
Except you did quite well in school, and then explain how Brother Leonard kind of screwed you over.
Oh, I applied to Harvard, Yale, Colby, and Bates. I didn't hear back from anybody. Go, well, this is weird.
And you killed it in school, and
good grades
it's not
and
like you
everything.
come from a lineage that automatically qualifies you for
right. And
those
small
schools.
town people, whatever. At any rate, so we go in to see Brother Leonard, who's at a Catholic high school. And my mother and I said, we don't know how you do this. And this was the days when you didn't have all the information that you have now. And we're going, and he goes, he said, I never sent you transcripts to any of those schools. But you have a full ride at Manhattan College, which is Catholic college, Christian Brothers, which was the high school. And my mother said, full ride, we don't have to pay anything? I go, yeah, that's right. And then my father went to Hamilton, which was, from Newburgh and where he was to go to Hamilton, very good. So we went up to Hamilton, I got into Hamilton, but no free ride. And my father said, well, you know where the bank is, so you can get down there and get the loan for, $2,000 or whatever the heck it was going to be. And I'm like, $2,000 versus a free ride. So I went, and it turned out great at Manhattan because it was a tough school. In those days, the Christian Brothers were devoted to sort of poor, lower middle class, whatever. In those days, it was primarily Irish and Italian, like Giuliani, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it was a tough place, very disciplined and useful. I went into advertising and people, tough business. I said, nothing compared to the Christian Brothers.
How Brother Leonard acted, you said, impacted you still to this day when it comes to authority figures.
I think so.
How so?
Well, just in general. I don't know. I only respect authority when you listen to it and it makes sense.
You think that started with Brother Leonard?
No, I think
You'd
it started
always
at
been that
home.
way. Okay.
Yeah, father, whatever. Yeah.
Why did you consider becoming a
Iron
priest?
Fist. I'm a kid. I'm 11, 12 years old, and Mass was kind of cool and big, and the idea of God and doing the right thing and a higher power and all that seemed very compelling to me at the time. And I kind of admired the priests and some of the brothers. One of the nuns, pretty nun, terrible, terrible. What a thing to say. So it just appealed to me at that time.
What changed?
I think the more that I got older, I started reading more, and I went, well, that's really not going to be for me. And girls, I kind of like girls, and priests and girls doesn't seem to work, or maybe I didn't understand. Maybe I'm not going to go there, but But I think primarily. Girls, and we can do other things besides being priests. But I did when I was a kid. I served Mass every day, I think for 2 years in a row, literally every day, 7 days a week.
Because it was that important to you at the time?
And it was cool. I liked it. It was fun.
What did you like about it?
I don't know. Just speaking Latin, and I don't know. You're sort of like in the spotlight, and other people are there and they're praying, and
So you end up...
And you're getting points for heaven, and good, all good stuff.
The career ambitions change. You end up getting into
I didn't have
advertising.
any ambitions then. After that, it was kind of like, okay, let's get an education, because that seems to be the way you're going to need that to get open doors. And I think after that, it actually was a little haywire. I right around 18, 19, whatever, I started reading like crazy. Stuff that we never got to read in high school, and then scribbling, and I really loved it, and I loved it so much that I couldn't just go like, well, your chances of making it as a novelist are very slim. So it didn't matter. I was going to try to do this no matter what.
But you have a detour in advertising.
I didn't have a detour because I kept writing.
But in terms of, kind of initial professional success came in kind of the ad world.
I did the first novel, which I wrote when I was 26, and won an Edgar as Best First Mystery and all that stuff. So I had some success, but part of it was I didn't want, and I don't know if this was right or not, but I didn't want my lifestyle to depend on the writing.
What?
Pay the apartment. I don't know. It just seemed to me like I wanted the writing just to be its own thing. So I got a job, and it was just I hadn't studied any advertising or marketing or anything. But I was always big on disrupting things. I actually have a nonfiction book coming out this year called Disrupt Everything, which is really about just blow everything up. CNN, blow it up, do something different. It's not working, whatever the heck, But even back then, I always, in my head, I didn't think of disruptions. But so J. Walter Thompson, I went there, and they had a thing where you would bring a portfolio, and they would look at it and get back to you or not get back to you. So I brought one in. A week later, I brought another portfolio. A week later, I brought another portfolio. And the fourth week, they said, "Okay, we're going to hire this kid," because I wasn't doing it the way you were supposed to do it. But it made sense to me, and I knew that you want to get their attention, so you want to do something that's different and appropriate, reasonable, and that's pretty much what I've always done.
Why did you call it Satan's place of business?
Oh, advertising?
Yeah.
That's kind of a joke,
But I mean, it was. You were saying
that
was
whole
tough.
lot. I mean, that was just sort of metaphors in writing, and it just. Part of the thing with the autobiography, and I actually think that's the best book I ever wrote, because it's honest and true, and not the easiest thing in the world to write a book about a writer who hasn't really done that many exciting things and make it a fun read.
Wait, what do you mean you haven't done that many exciting things?
What have I done? I got married, I had a kid, I write books, which isn't necessarily the most interesting thing in the world to read about.
Yeah, but
I'm not Hemingway. I wasn't in the Spanish-American War. Whatever.
Yeah, but most would argue when you're the best at what you do, you have a lot of
it's satisfying.
Insight that can be offered in life experiences.
Yeah. Well, I let people figure that out. But I mean, part of it is I just told story after story after story, and that was an interesting thing. I wasn't a good speaker when I was at Thompson because I was nervous and scared and shy and whatever. And at one point, I did a thing with the New York Times. There was 5 authors, and we all had to speak. And I followed a woman, and she was hilarious. And she just told story after story. And I came up there and I sucked. And I said, no, that was good, what she did with the stories. And so that became my gig then. I would, whenever I have to speak anywhere, I just tell stories. And then when I decided to write the autobiography, it was the same thing, just story after story. When I talk about Newberg, I write about a page about if this was a book, a serious nonfiction book, and I wrote a page of like what Newberg, the historical, and all that stuff. And I said, if you're looking for that, it's not going to be in this book. It's just going to be stories. And I thought, and I think it's moderately humorous. The interesting thing, and one of the other reasons I needed to get out of Newberg was I would tell stuff that I thought was funny, and you do something and it's sort of off the wall, and people are looking to go, really? I go, no, not really. Or if they're tough guys, they go, you trying to be funny? I was, but it's not working. Please don't hit me,
I want to jump back to the ad business.
Yeah.
I think it was Burger King, Nestle, and Unilever.
There were a lot
of them. You
them.
said still give you the occasional nightmare. How about the worst, the worst horror story from your work on any of the accounts?
many.
How about the most severe one that comes to mind?
The Nestle guy, the guy who the ultimate, you'd have to go through all these layers, but I always compared it to Donkey Kong. You would go through all these layers and he'd be up there and just Donkey Kong you, That was horrifying. The guy, the first marketing guy at Burger King was another horror show. And I can remember I was flying down there with this friend of mine, very funny Italian guy. And at this point, he was my boss on creative, Frank Niccolo, wonderful, wonderful human being. And he said, Jimmy, he said, I would rather this plane went down than we had to go and meet this guy at Burger King. That's the kind of client he was. Weirdly then, this client, after I'm, have all these novels, he goes, oh, Jimmy, how are you, blah, 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 blah. I got a book, could you give me a blurb?
Did you?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, come on.
I did. What the hell,
Okay, but wait, how about the worst story that comes to mind from...
A script came yesterday. I swear to God, it's on my desk upstairs. You can look at it. And it was another Burger King client who, and I liked him a lot, but he fired us. And he sent me a screenplay. And I read it and I said, yeah, it's a pretty good screenplay. Too violent, but you always were a violent guy.
So I'm looking for something that comes to mind from the experiences on accounts, like that gives some color to just how bad it was.
Off the top of my mind, I don't know. If there's one that comes to your...
It was just tough work.
Yeah, it's very difficult to go out and have to present ideas to people. And in a lot of cases, they don't understand a storyboard and how it's going to translate to film. So it becomes, or they're just afraid. And a lot of the clients that Thompson had were just kind of afraid. Well, let's just play it safe, which is not a lot of fun. I mean, Lever Brothers would have all these rules. I remember I had to go on a shoot, or the good part of it was the shoot was in Paris. I didn't want to go, but you got to go. Okay, fine. And it was this skincare product, and they had all these rules about, well, her elbow has to be at this angle, and the thing, and her hair has to be like this, and you're like, oh my God, it's just horrifying. You don't make movies like this, but they did.
But so it was just defeating kind of.
I think the hard thing was just trying to sell. The beauty of my situation now is pretty much I can go to the publisher and say, I have this idea. And most of the time, they're going to go do it. Yeah. Mostly, yeah.
Your role in Battle of the Burgers and the Toys R Us jingle?
Well, I wrote the line. It's sort of the one I'm best known for. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. So that was a highlight. A lot of the Kodak work I thought was pretty good. We did a spot with Mike Tyson, was really quite stunning, I thought.
How did that come about?
And his love for Customato. Well, we just knew, here's this tough guy, and we knew that he had this real soft spot, for this guy who had found him, Customato, and trained him and whatever. And I think Cuss had died recently. And we thought it would be really an emotional thing if Mike would do the spot, which he did. So those are kind of the highlights when you're going to get to do Burger King. We did the Battle of the Burgers, and that was amazing because, I mean, literally, it's kind of hard to believe at this point, but when people would watch the 6 o'clock news, and for about a month, every night, they would talk about the Battle of the Burgers, Burger King taking on McDonald's, and McDonald's lawsuits and all this stuff. And I remember going to court with the McDonald's lawyers, and I think they knew that the suit was silly. There was because everything we did, it was just factual. Like McDonald's small burger was 20% smaller than Burger King's small burger. So we had a little girl, a very cute girl. I can't remember her name, but she actually had a pretty good acting career after that. She said, "Do I look 20% smaller to you?" I do to McDonald's, and but you're making the point. Okay, for what it's worth, their hamburger is smaller. So it was all factual stuff, but they didn't like it.
At 30.
But I found the depositions to be hilarious.
Oh, did you? What?
Oh, they're hilarious.
Like what?
Well, because they're asking all these ridiculous questions. Like I don't remember exactly now, but I mean, no, but your hamburger is 20% smaller. What are we missing here? And you fry, they broil. It's pretty simple. I mean, I know we made it moderately humorous, but so what?
And did everybody know that?
They backed
stupid.
Off. They backed off. Yeah. I think so, and their lawyers did too. And I mean, actually, it was playful with their lawyers. I mean, because I think they got it that this is not going anywhere.
You have a big meeting with Quaker, and the night before, your boss asks if he can share the hotel room.
Yeah, that was weird.
Take it from there.
Well, yeah, this was I was in New York at the time, but I was handling clients out of Chicago. Quaker was one of them, and we had Kennel Ration and Aunt Jemima pancakes. I don't know what that's called now, and they were really taking care of me. It was really nice. I had a nice suite when I would go out there, or a nice hotel suite. And the guy he wasn't my boss, but he was the head account guy on the business. And he lived out in Lake Forest, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. And he said, well, you know what, we have this meeting at 8 o'clock, so why don't we just have dinner and I'll just stay in the apartment with you. I said, yeah, fine, no problem. So we had dinner, we go back, it's 10 o'clock, wherever the hell it is. I get into bed, the door opens, the guy comes in and he jumps into bed with me. And I'm like, damn, I don't know where you got that idea, but this is not, and I'm not one to kind of like get angry or anything. It was just like, I don't know why you thought this, but this is not going to happen. So you're going to have to go now. And also in those days, I wasn't going to bring it to human resources or whatever hell they called it, personnel. It's like, okay, fine, no harm, no foul, go. It was weird, I mean, after that, to have the guy. And I never told anybody, and maybe there's something in that too. I eventually told my boss of bosses who lives here in Palm Beach. He couldn't believe it. He said, he was gay? I think so. I don't know, just a guess. But, he got into bed naked, so I think he's gay.
You ever run into the guy again?
No, soon after that, he moved to another town. It didn't have anything to do with that, but yeah, and he was in advertising wherever this other town, No, but I never did. Yeah. I did. I mean, that year I did. Yes.
But afterwards,
no.
Yeah. At 38, you're CEO of J. Walter Thompson North America. Yet, all the while you're running the ad agency, you're writing 1 to 2 best-selling novels a year. But you also said. You knew you were kind of burning the candle at both ends.
Yeah, and I also knew I was going to get out of the advertising thing. The guy who ran the whole company, I think he was earmarking me to run the whole company. And I told him, I mean, I think to my credit, I said, Bert.
Bert Manning.
Yeah, Bert, I'm not doing this.
Who was a great mentor to you.
Yeah, he was like my grandmother. He took me under his wing. He taught me how to do stuff. He, tortured me. I said, I'm going to go off at some point, right, and I'm just going to write the novels.
How did...
The reason that I didn't is, one, in that job, I would only hire one kind of person, almost always, and those were talented and nice to be around. So it was a good group. I enjoyed them. They were fun. They were friends. And a lot of them were friends. I still write with some of them. Brian Sitz, who I'm writing with, Brian was there. Niccolo, Frank Niccolo, I still work with.
When you were in it, though, how did you have the time to do both in terms of the, running
24 hours in a day.
The...
I wrote this morning before this. Mm-hmm. I've always been able to just sit down and write, blah, blah, on a plane write, I would always...
Would that kind of be your escape?
Yeah,
from
pretty much.
Your day-to-day work?
Yes, okay. from the Satan stuff. But
which is remarkable that your escape was best-selling books.
Yeah, well, I love doing it. When I was there, I would pretty much set aside an hour, 45 minutes every day, and just lock myself in the office. Even when I was CEO, and write for an hour. And I would write before I would go to work. I'd get up at 5:30 and write till 6:30 or 6:45, and then go into work. And I would go home and write, frequently.
You said
and that's why I had all those relationships that, no. No.
You said grad school at Vanderbilt was kind of a defining period for you, but it was on your drive home from Vanderbilt, the day plus of driving, that you would think through Broadway musicals.
Oh, that was crazy. Yeah.
So explain that.
I don't know. Well, I would just, one time I actually drove it straight. It was 26 hours from Nashville to Lexington, Mass. And you got to stay awake. And I will say the last 3 hours I should not have been on the road. And it was night. It was bad. That could have been, we might not have had this interview. I would just write these musicals. I'd have the story, and I would just go, and I'd be just writing them in my head and singing songs that didn't exist.
Do you remember any of them?
No, hell no.
Well, so what would you do with them?
Nothing.
That was it. That was just a way to kind of entertain.
That was entertaining me. I liked them.
At your 5 years you spent working at a mental hospital.
Yeah.
You said
that's why I worked my way through college. Right.
You read like a man possessed.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, in Catholic high school, they made us read a lot of stuff that turned us off to books. And that's one of my things about, because we try to help get kids reading. If the objective is to get children reading, do not give them books that turn them off. It's relatively simple. That's what I said about focus and what you're, and stupidly, boards of education, they have these kids read stuff that turns them off. That doesn't make any sense. So in high school, Catholic high school, they gave us a lot of stuff that turned us off. And I would go into Cambridge 3 times a week or so and just buy all these paperbacks for like a dime and stuff, used paperbacks. And I started reading this stuff, and I'm going, oh, I love this stuff. This is really cool. This is, and it wasn't the kind of, commercial stuff that I write now, although eventually I did read some commercial stuff. But it was, it's just more serious stuff, some comedic stuff. Thomas Berger, 100 Years of Solitude, which was still my favorite novel I've ever read. And it just turned me on. And then I started scribbling, and I loved it. It was that simple. I fell in love with scribbling stories. In
your 1976 novel, which was your first book, was rejected by 31 publishers.
Yeah.
What was the response you got 2 days after submitting your 32nd?
I picked up the New York Times book review, and there was a story about a young agent who, he was aggressive and he wanted to read stuff, blah, 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 blah. So I sent him, this packed in a cardboard box manuscript over that I had already tried to sell myself. And like the next day, I got a call from his office. I go, I can't believe they turned it down this quickly, He said, no. This is Francis Greenberger. Come on over. I'm going to sell this thing.
You're thinking what?
I'm thinking he's going to sell this thing. And what he did was he set me up with a young editor, and I worked with this guy for a couple of months, and in terms of smoothing out the novel. And then Francis Colby said, well, he doesn't want to do it, but he thinks it's great. And he said, I'm going to sell it this week. And he sold it to Little Brown that week, which was actually a much better place to be.
Why did it hit with number 32 when it didn't the first 31 times? Or was that the first person that actually paid attention to it?
Yeah, you never know. You never know. It could have been the other places nobody even. I know that I got a couple of nice rejection letters. I remember William Morrow. It was a nice, and you don't know about the other ones whether they ever read it.
What did John McDonald write about your novel that sent like shivers down your spine?
Well, it was such a. He said, "I'm quite sure," and I'm a kid. I'm 26. Yeah, John D. McDonald. He said, "I'm quite sure that James Patterson wrote 1 million words before he started this novel," which was great. And I hadn't, because I was a kid. I'd written, but just a lot of short stories. And so I never had anything published.
And that meant what to you?
Well, one, that he wasn't kidding. It wasn't just some like polite, blurb. He was knocked out by it, which was great. The same thing happened with the autobiography. I mean, some of the quotes that I got back from that, like Admiral McRaven, who said it's the best book I've read in 50 years, and he's a smart dude. And you just go like, okay, that's just somebody trying to be pleasant with a blurb. Bob Woodward, who I had not met, I've interviewed him since then, but he wrote this unbelievable thing. Once again, and you just go like, ooh, these they really like this book.
Your first novel that like really took off, Along Came a Spider, the first of the Alex Cross books. You didn't have a lot of money then, and a Hollywood studio wants it, but they want to make a change. Why, considering the circumstances,
you're great at this,
did
the
you
way
still
you set up
refuse?
the punchline. It's so cool,
please.
And I didn't have a lot of money. And it was a $1 million offer on the table, but I had it.
And $1 million offer back then.
Back then, and in my circumstances too. But I had to change Alex from, instead of being a black man, they wanted to be a white guy. And I said, no, not doing it.
What'd they say?
They said, bye. So that was the end of that.
And what?
And years later,
at that time, what's going on when, like when they say "see you later"?
I don't know.
You're fine.
Come.
Is that?
Yeah.
But that takes a lot of strength too.
Do we blurb that? What do we do?
No,
with
it's
that?
fine. But it takes not many people in that situation, considering those circumstances, would handle it that way.
Yeah, and sometimes, I was talking to Michael Connelly recently, and he did one book that sold. He's had, I think, good luck with a lot of stuff in Hollywood, but the one which actually Clint Eastwood did, and he didn't like, and I thought it was a terrible movie too. But he said, you don't have to take the money. You don't have to take the money. You can just walk. You can just say no. So, but if you sell it, then they're going to do what they do.
And that kind of stuck with you.
No, that was, it's not really an answer to your question. The reaction, I don't know. I just did it. I don't remember exactly, but it was like, okay, no, we're not going to do it.
And with Along Came the Spider on the publishing front, you really felt like TV advertising was the way to go. What did the publisher say, and then what did you ultimately end up doing?
Well, I thought we could do TV commercials they loved it, and they bought it for a fair amount of money, And in fact, they insisted it be a 2-book deal, which I wasn't planning necessarily to write another Alex Cross novel. And I said, yes, I will write another Alex Cross novel. And that was $1 million for the 2, which in those, it was like, ooh, okay, yeah. 2 Alex Crosses, I'm there.
Right.
What was it?
The TV advertising.
So I said, because I'm in advertising,
right.
whatever. I said, I can do, and they said, no, we don't do TV advertising. We've never done it. And I said, all right, fine. So I just went in and I did a TV commercial for like $2,000. They'd gotten these nice quotes from Nelson DeMille and a few other writers. And it was just a very simple thing. It was a 30-second spot. It just had this little spider coming down and landing on the top of it, which was the cover. So it cost nothing to do it. And I brought it into them. They said, "Oh, this is cool," and they ran it.
And the impact that had.
Yeah. Well, and then the weird thing was, nobody from the publisher calls, and I pick up the New York Times Book Review, and it's number 6. I'm going like, wow. I'm really thinking like, is this a mistake? This is so weird. And there was a Barnes & Noble about 3 blocks away. So I go over to the Barnes & Noble, And in the window, there's like 2 copies of the book. I'm going, well, this is promising. And because I'm still doubting this thing. And I'd been in the store before because what I used to do and what a lot of authors do is we'll count the books. And I knew there used to be like 12 copies. And I go over to where the thing, and there's only 6 copies. I'm like, damn, maybe this is number 6, you know, so I'm feeling good. And while I'm there, this woman picks up the book. And if you pick up our book in the airport, we're watching. And if you buy it, it makes our day, seriously. If you put it down, it kind of breaks our heart a little bit, you know. So this woman, she's looking through it and leafing through it. And then she puts it under her arm, she walks down the aisle, and she sticks it into her pocketbook. She stole it. And all I'm thinking is, does this count as a sale, you know?
Does it?
No.
So I was texting actually with Ron Howard yesterday.
Yeah.
And he texted about you. I've always wondered if he thinks of the books as products or himself as a brand, or what did he carry with him from his major advertising career that helped him as an author?
No, I don't think of myself as a product or a brand. My thing is always, I'm always motivated. I just want this book to be as good as it can be, and it doesn't always work out that way, unfortunately. It's always a book where I think people are gonna want to read it. You know, that there's an idea that you can communicate relatively quickly, and they're going to go, you know, yeah, that sounds, you know, the number one dad book, this thing about being a better dad in an hour. I think it's a good thing to do. I think, you know, in terms of the world, but I think especially, you know, wives and mothers and whatever, they're going to go, yeah, my guy needs that. Let's give it a shot. An hour, we can do that, you know.
But what about the involvement in designing the books or in devising the advertising or marketing campaigns?
There's a few pieces to it. One is the book, okay? And the second piece, especially as you watch publishing, which is not terribly good at marketing or advertising or any of that stuff. And I do have a skill set there. So I just do what I can. You know, so I will be involved in the covers, certainly improving them, and sometimes creating them, like the Thomas Barrowman, my first one, I actually, and a few of them I've created the covers. I don't want to get into their business too much, but you do, you know, because a lot of times they're not that good at it. And great books can get down the drain, or books that you love can get ruined. And then they'll go like, oh, well, it didn't sell very well. Yeah, okay, well, the cover's terrible, and you didn't sell it, and you never got it into Walmart and whatever. Not my books, but you know.
What are the granular details that you'll pay attention to?
Cover, for sure. I have a simple, you know, and a lot of these things, it's coming down to a simple way to look at things and judge things. So my thing on covers is, it's a very simple thing. I saw it, I want it. And it's the same principle in terms of television commercials. If they don't notice it, so book cover, if it's there, if you don't notice it, here's, you know, 10,000 books in bar. If you don't notice that book, you're dead, obviously, and then you're going to want it. So I notice it, I want it. I pick it up. Nobody's ever bought a book in a store that they didn't pick up. I mean, that's simple-minded, but that's reality. And now online, where they're small, so now it's got to work in like this size. For that, okay, well, let me click on that.
And what are the lengths you'll go to
I'll go all lengths, whatever it takes.
And
no,
what does
I
that
don't
mean?
know. No, well, sometimes we'll design them. Sue sometimes will design them, and say, but you just and they're fine with it because they want that to happen. But once again, that simple principle: is anybody going to notice this thing? You know, same with commercials. You can run a commercial that 1% of the audience notices, or you can run a commercial that 70% of the people notice. That's a huge difference.
Right. How many bestsellers have you had?
I don't have no idea.
Oh, come on.
Oh, I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't care. As I said, I don't look backwards that much. It's just what's the next stuff. Let's talk about, you know, the books coming out this year.
How about the percentage?
The book with President Clinton coming out. That's a cool one. We just got, which is really cool, Stephen Knight, who did, what is it?
Peaky Blinders.
Stephen Knight, who did Peaky Blinders. And he's one of the most, you know, and he's going to write now the series for The First Gentleman. So that's a cool thing.
So you don't like looking back, though. I was going to say
not too much.
The percentage of hardcover novels sold in the U.S. that are yours. Last stat I read was something like 6%.
I don't know the numbers. Is what?
6%?
No, that's crazy. No, I don't know what. And publisher makes stuff up. Don't believe that.
And your novels in recent years have sold more copies than Stephen King, John Grisham, and Dan Brown combined?
That's true.
You're always on the Forbes list as well because of your success. Explain kind of the economics of the business, if you don't mind.
It's a very simple thing, but it's totally sell more books to more people. No, that sounds stupid, but it isn't. It's totally, yes, sell more books. Okay, what does that mean? That means that if the people who really like me, they're buying 2 of my books a year, you want to get it to 3. How do you get it to 3? So who are the people, logically, that you can reach? Obviously, the people who already like my books a lot. You can reach the traders who have stopped reading me. You can go back and say, James, he's okay. You shouldn't have given him up. Don't you miss him? And then you can get people who read comparable books but don't read me. And that's it. That's the audience. So how do you talk to that group of people, which is a small group, relatively small?
You said you're obsessive about efficiency and budget controls.
I did?
How so? Yeah.
Really?
Or at least from interview of a long while back. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you want to do things as efficiently as you can for everybody's, purpose. The charities, when we do those, I don't want the bureaucracy. We're not going to throw money into the fund where you're going to take 4% out every year. We don't want our names on buildings. So in terms of the charities, we tend to do a lot of scholarships. And lately, the area which I love, and it's not just, oh, you're such a nice person, historically black universities and colleges, because they don't have money. They don't have money for scholarships, mostly. So many kids get in there and they're going to walk out with a lot of debt, and or they can't even go. They're accepted, but they can't go because they just literally can't afford to go. And if you look at those schools, and this once again is just getting down to why I love that area, Sue and I love that area, 60% of the black doctors in this country come out of historically black universities and colleges. These are 50% of the black lawyers. I don't blame them for the lawyer thing, but the doctor thing, okay, so we've gone through all this period of, let's bring more black kids in. All these other schools are only supplying 40%. These historically black, they're 60% of the black doctors. I'm there. And so all we do is scholarships there. Never do full scholarships because I want the kids to have skin in the game. But all of a sudden, here's $10,000 showing up in the porch every year. Wow, this is good. The family, yay, hey, somebody cares, and this really helps.
Vanity Fair 2014 wrote about you that rumors are that success has mellowed you some, and that you no longer are so insistent and demanding. Their words. Your thoughts?
Rumors. I don't even know what that means. I don't know who they spoke to.
You think you've mellowed?
Yeah, probably a bit, but I think I'm better as a writer and a thinker than I've ever been. I think the last couple of years, a lot of the books are, I think, the best I've done, commercial books.
And what
the
is
Jane
it
Smith books, I think, are really great. I don't know, more focused. The autobiography made me a better writer for sure. Because I didn't want to mess it up. So I really paid attention to the sentences, which I hadn't been doing as much of. That's important. That's useful.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Another quote that I know you've referred to before, perfection is the enemy of progress.
Oh, yeah.
Your view of that and how it applies to you?
It just gets in the way of stuff. It's just, these people that, I've been working on it for 9 years. Oh, just do it. Just send it in, blah, 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 blah.
But did you just contradict what you were saying then about your memoir? I mean, is there kind of a time and place for with what you do to be hyper focused? Oh,
I don't think the memoir is perfect, but I think it really works well. It's biscuits, really biscuits. And I think, and once again, there are a lot of. If you tell a good story, you don't necessarily have to be a great writer. The story is good. It is. I mean, there it is. Frida, whatever, not a great writer, but really good stories. A lot of my stuff, Grisham, probably. I don't mean to demean John, but not let's say not a great stylist, but good stories.
But the memoir being not perfect,
It's not perfect.
Does that mean that had you spent more time, it would have been better? But it gets to
I don't know if it would have
to
gotten better. Maybe.
Because what I was going to ask was, does it get to a point where you just recognize it is
This is good. Let's do something else. Yeah,
time to
for
move
sure.
on?
Yeah. No, but the perfect stuff, you get in Hollywood, and it drives me crazy. I'll sit in these meetings on a Zoom call where they're torturing the screenwriter. And, he'll be 20 people in the meeting, and they're all these little footnotes, which should be footnotes, but they all think they're important. And it's just like, no, that's getting in the way. This process is taking 5 times longer than it should. It's taking, and the lawyers and it's insane. The Hollywood process is totally insane. It needs to be blown up. It makes no sense. It should be it should be a limited number of people involved at the studio level, at the production level, getting there. It should be, it should just be a small number of people in a room, just getting, smart people. And money's involved, and that's important. But it doesn't get better because you had 10, 12, 15 people in there. And they all have to, look like they know what they're talking about. So that's a mess. And then obviously the unions and everything. I mean, the shoots are ridiculous in terms of what you have to, look at this. Look at
Oh, please.
these are good people. These are, except the sound guy.
I was talking to your buddy, famed writer also, Mike Lupica,
Famed
yesterday.
in his own head, yes.
He told me working with you is a masterclass in storytelling.
That's
he
correct.
pointed out one of the things he finds most remarkable about you is that you know the finish line from the start. What's the writing process entail for you?
Well, I know what the core is. I know what the core of the story is. I interviewed Michael Connelly. He's a very good mystery writer. And Michael said, I have a hunch about the story. I kind of know, I'm doing a thing with Mr. Beast now, and I kind of know a novel, and I kind of know it has the pieces. I know it has the parts. I know it. I'm not sure exactly how it's all going to go, but I know I have it. And the ending could change. But I know what I'm doing a book, I think it's this year, The First Nazi, which is a Hitler historical, and it's a really cool thing. It's a story that I'm not going to reveal it here, but it's a story that hasn't been told about Hitler, which is a mind blower. And I know I have the parts, I know I have the pieces. Occasionally, and I know I have the voice. That's another thing. People would think my voice is short chapters. That's not a voice. Short chapters just recognizes that a lot of people don't have a lot of time. And it can really help the pace of things. We just keep chugging along and, It's scenes. It's like scenes in a movie for me. And if everybody wrote that way, it'd be a disaster, but they don't. Although a lot of people have ripped me off, but that's okay. Rip away. Yeah, I feel honored by that, sure. They steal plots from the books out in Hollywood. There are 2 on the air right now. I go like, oh my God, I can't believe they stole the plot.
You go after them?
No, because it's hopeless.
You were doing one of your book tours with Lupica.
Yeah.
You guys do a week a year or whatever it is. You're staying at some inn on the Jersey Shore. The 2 of you are going for a walk with your wife, Sue. At some point, you're like, I've had enough of this.
Oh, yeah. This was crazy.
By the time he got back, you had your next book.
It was raining like hell. It was awful. And they go, you want to go for a walk? I go, no. Come on. All right, fine. So we all go around, and it really is raining like crazy. So we walk about 100 yards or something toward the ocean. I go, you know what? You guys go. I'm already soaked, and I don't need this. So I'm walking back toward the little inn that we're in, and there's a road, and there's this little old guy on a bicycle. He's riding into the wind, whatever. And one word popped into my brain, and I went back into the hotel and wrote a 5-page outline of another novel, which Mike and I have since finished.
And it's
but
coming
he came
out when?
back. It's coming out next year, I think. But he came back and I said, you got to read this outline. It's really cool.
And you always have a white legal pad and a number 2 pencil.
White or yellow, yes.
From idea to turning it into a book entails what?
Outline. I'm a huge outliner. Interestingly, in my interviews, like Mike Connolly is not an outliner, Baldacci is not an outliner, but I am.
Why?
I just, every chapter, boom. I just did one, it's 90 chapters or 90 paragraphs, which gives you the idea for what that chapter is supposed to, what's going to drive that chapter. But I'm not a slave to it. And almost invariably, the ending changes. And as you're writing, certain characters get more interesting, or I was going to kill the bad guy, but I really like this bad guy. He's gonna make it through here somehow. I don't know, whatever.
So even if Luke Bicca says you can see the finish at the start,
I think he means the finished novel, not necessarily the ending. He means I know the voice. Mm-hmm. The voice is really important, and there's, there's just and I read a lot of kids' books too. I Funny, which are comedic, better be comedic, called I Funny. The voice in that versus Alex Cross or versus Jane Smith, which I do with Mike, with Lupica, or the Nazi. It's just different voices. The Nazi book is more like a historical novel. Different voices, though.
When the outline those like 50 to 80 pages,
yeah.
Why then hand it off to a co-author?
I can't do them all. I can't do 9 novels. I can do 1 or 2 a year.
And which is an extraordinary
That's a lot,
amount.
yeah.
And you recognized early on that that's the cadence that you enjoy, meaning rather than continue to delve into a particular work, you'd rather collaborate with somebody so you could also take a dive into the next one. And
I love the. I love writing the outlines. I love figuring out the story, and I have so many of them. Upstairs, there's a pile of gold with the clever ideas on it. It's about thick, and I want to find out. I want to find out what's going to happen. And whether it's going to work or not. And that's where sometimes I'll have an idea and I'll start to write the outline and go, I can't make the story work.
The criticism of you that you wrote about in your memoir, when people bring up my practice of writing with co-authors, they usually aren't thinking nice thoughts. What are they thinking in your mind?
Look, if we're ever going to save this world, it's going to be because we learn to collaborate. Sistine Chapel, 20, 30, whatever, really good painters doing the Sistine Chapel, most music, films, collaborative, and fiction. It doesn't have to be all the time. Stephen King has collaborated in the past. Advertising is all collaboration. Tends to be writer, art director, maybe producer. So that was in terms of this works pretty well. But once again, if it's not for somebody, it's not for somebody. But mostly people just, well, that's not the way I do it. Well, okay, so what? You do it the way you do it. That's fine.
I was reading that Sports Illustrated article on you for many years back that Jack McCallum wrote, and he he compared collaborating and writing to something like having a kid with, or 3 people, or, just...
Hey, look, if it works with 3 people,
Well, but it's the exception.
I don't know who the daddy, I don't know who the mommy, whatever, yeah.
But it's the exception as opposed to the norm in your world. So, like, why do you think you've been able to make it work so well?
I think a piece of it was in the advertising. I experienced that the collaboration can be just fine, so I wasn't afraid of it. And then the first one, actually, a friend of mine, Peter DeYoung, and we wrote Miracle on the 17th Green, a short book. And we had finished a round of golf, and we were just shooting the breeze. I said, I have this idea for this story, and I blah, blah, blah. I said, you want to write it together? And it was fun. It was fun. It worked out well. And both of our strengths. Peter's I'm a better storyteller. He's a better stylist. So the novel worked pretty well. And I only work with people who, when I did the book shots, which were these novellas, and that was insanity.
Why?
Because we're doing like 3 a month, and that was just, I had to go out and find, this is once again in terms of problem solving, I had to find a bunch of writers in a hurry. And so one of the things I did is, there are books that come out every year, best short stories, mystery short stories of the year, and I would just start reading them. And I would find these guys that I thought, men and women, who just wrote good scenes. And then I would just call them up. I'd call them over the phone. Hi, it's James Patterson. Yeah, right, sure. No, for real. I just read your story, blah, 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 blah. Would you be interested in working on a novella with me? I'll send you an outline if you are. And you can improve on the outline, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, and that's how, we just did that, boom. Making it up, figuring out how to do it. But once again, I mean, most people won't do that with...
What?
Won't use their imagination, come up with different ways of solving things. When I first took over J. Walter Thompson, that office, some of the offices had good reputation. The New York office had a terrible reputation, and I couldn't get good people to work there. So I ran an ad in the New York Times. I really ran it once. Write if you want work. And it had all these goofy things like a Trappist, Trappist monks aren't supposed to talk to anybody, and it was sell a telephone system to Trappist monks, or here are the ingredients for beans, and vinegar, water, whatever. Make it sound delicious. So they were all like hard problems, but you could read these things, and once again you could immediately figure out whether the person was a good writer and whether they could solve problems, which is what you want. And the solve problems is a bigger deal in terms of people in advertising.
And there's connectivity between that and then what you look for in a co-writer.
Co-writing, it's scenes. I just want people who can write scenes.
You mentioned, as we were getting going, the Substack interviews you're doing, and how you're working on one with Stephen King.
Well, we'll see. That's a real, if-com. We'll see what happens.
Where does that stand?
I don't know. We've talked to his people, and it's possible. But I would love to do it. I think it would be great. One of the things that I said to his people was, look, we could do some good in the world. We could get more kids reading. There's a lot of things we could do if we collaborated a little bit.
He called you before a terrible writer.
Yeah.
Why?
That's just silly. I don't know. I don't know. He might have read something that was terrible. And I have done, Season of the Machete is a terrible book that I wrote. So if he read that, I could see calling me a terrible writer if I read that book. Virgin is also not terribly well written. Jericho Commandment, not terrible. Some of the early books they're not. I could go along with that. I don't know about terrible, but I've evolved and I'm pretty good now.
You think he's competitive with you?
I don't know.
And that's it?
Don't know.
Jealous?
Don't know. We'll see.
What's your gut tell you, though?
I don't know. Call him up. Get him on film. I don't know.
Okay, the murder of Stephen King.
That was great. Well,
was that? I mean, were you trying to screw with him a little bit?
Yeah, but in a fun way. He was the hero of the book.
Yeah.
He doesn't get killed. It was a novella, one of these book shots that I did, and I guess trying to be nice, the publisher sent him a note and sent him the book actually, and his people called and they said, well, that wouldn't be good because I think his wife Tabitha, somebody showed up, broke into their house and stuff, and I'm going like, well, I don't know. In my mind, then he should stop writing his books because that happened because of his books, not because of the murder of Stephen King. He's a hero in the book, so it's not, it's not like he's. And I thought it would be funny, the murder. That's a funny idea, I think.
And what happened?
We ate it. 100,000 copies.
Okay.
They didn't publish it.
Okay.
You want to buy a copy? I'll sell you. I have 20 copies. I'll sell it to you for 10,000.
Okay, but explain why.
Why what?
You ate it.
Out of respect. Fine. Okay.
Because he just didn't.
Well, yeah, his wife, whatever. We just, okay, fine. We won't publish it.
All right.
I tend to do, even negotiating, like this whole thing with the lawyers with 100 different points. No. What I try to do in all cases is, look, what do you want? What do I want? Here are the 5 or 6 points. Okay. The lawyers, these are the 5 or 6 points. That's it. You can forget about the rest of the crap. We don't care about it. Don't spend a lot of time. We want to see the contracts in a week, period. That's it. That's all there is. I mean, unless, you're negotiating with somebody and they want 150 points. When I do something with President Clinton or Dolly or whatever, it's fairly simple and straightforward.
And some of the remaining moments that I have with you in the interview, I wanted
remaining moments? Oh my God.
I wanted to ask you
okay?
about some of the notable folks that you've crossed paths with over the years. But actually, before we do that, they're all in everybody's life, there are certain periods that shape them. And somebody I wanted to ask you about who seems to have had an enormous impact on your life was Jane, who you lived with for 7 years, passed away at 39.
Yeah.
You said that she totally saved you, your words. How so?
Once again, knocking any chips off my shoulder. I'll give you an example, which I wrote in the book. She was just a sweet, nice person, smart, and just one of the best people I've ever met. And she made me go out to this French restaurant in New York, and I'm this kid from upstate, and I don't know from French restaurants, and she knows that I'm like a little nervous and stuff, and not totally comfortable. I'm 27 or whatever, 25 maybe. And so we're at the table, and she did this in a way that it wasn't going to bother people around her. And she had some kind of French stew, and she just took her face and put it into the French stew, and came up with the stew on her face. And she said, "This is our restaurant. We're here. This is, relax. It's all good." And that was kind of the way she was. And then she wiped the stew off. But I mean, the point was, relax. This, it's not a big thing, and she got me to get used to certain things, and her family had some money. She got me used to, that kind of side of it. And she was never she wasn't a money kind of person, but she was just a good life guide.
In what ways do you think she caused you to change your view of yourself?
Confidence. You can do it. She was there for the Thomas Behrman number, so that was a big deal. She's very funny, and confidence in your humor, and I think probably the most important thing, weirdly, is understanding that I could love another person at that level, and that I was lovable. Key, huge, massive. To realize that as you move forward. I mean, like with Sue, to know that I can love another person and that I'm a lovable person, that's massive. And a lot of guys, I mean, that's one of the issues with the #1 dad book. A lot of guys don't really think they're lovable. They can kid about it and they can brag about it, but they don't really believe they're lovable.
You said...
And they don't know how to love another person.
In her remaining days, she's in a wheelchair. There are clumps of hair you wrote about sprouting all over her head. And you wrote that yet during those days, I was more in love with Jane than I'd ever been.
Yeah.
Why?
She was just a saint. She was so conscious of other people. She would, she was in and out of hospitals for a couple of years.
Brain tumor.
And people would visit her all the time. And she had these 50 different funny hats because she didn't want them to come and be bummed out. We wanted to get married at the end, and we just said, it's going to bum people out. It's just going to be a weepy wedding, and it's so we're not going to do it. But that's how conscious she was of other people.
What do you think you learned through being with her in those final days?
The main thing was just this notion about loving someone and what that means, and that you're capable of it, which I think is huge for a lot of people. I don't know that they, especially now, I think a lot of people, they just don't know. They think it's going to be all this sacrifice and they have to change like crazy, and it doesn't really have to be that way. And if you're in a relationship where you feel you're going to have to change like crazy, you're probably in the wrong relationship.
I want to bounce through some notable folks you've crossed paths with over the years. You still have Tom Cruise's number in your wallet?
I might. I don't know. The Tom Cruise thing, the agent, or my agent, the agency, as a creative artist, called up and he said, "Tom Cruise would like to meet you. There'd been an article about me in the New York Times." And I said, "Okay." He said, "Well, we'll send a car to pick you up, but don't tell him where you're going." So I said, "Okay, fine." So it wasn't far from the hotel, and they pull up to a gate. And the driver goes, "Hey, this is Tom Cruise's place." I said, "Okay, fine." And then got out, and I spent a couple hours with Tom Cruise. And his little girl in those days who was a sweetheart, and she sat in his lap for the first half an hour. I mean, you know, whatever, life is life, and it does its crazy thing. But it was a delight. It was an absolute delight. I loved spending the time with him. And he said, well, look, if you got anything for me, and I never really had anything for him that I felt, you know, this would be a great vehicle for Tom Cruise. And he gave me his phone number. He said, this is my number, blah, 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 blah. And I did keep it in my wallet for a long time. I think I finally got rid of it, but, you know.
How was Patti LaBelle often singing at your apartment?
Oh, she wasn't singing in the apartment. There was a terrace outside of this little studio apartment. And Patti LaBelle and my next door neighbor, they used to go out there late at night and they would sing on the terrace. And part of me is like, this is really cool. And part of me is like, I got to get up in the morning. So I'm going to have to go out and talk to these people and say, I love when you're singing, but, you know, you have to stop.
How about meeting James Taylor at the hospital?
Well, when I worked my way through college at a mental hospital, McLean in Belmont, Massachusetts, and one of the patients was James Taylor. And this is before he hadn't, you know, he hadn't signed up with Apple Records, which was the Beatles imprint. And but he would sing, and he would sing in the cafeteria like 2 or 3 times a week. You'd go over there, or the coffee shop. And he had already written like Fire and Rain and Sweet Baby James and stuff like that. And here you'd be, and I'd be like sitting right here, have bred a couple of patients, and there would be James Taylor, but he was nobody, but he was great. You're kind of like, this guy is so good. And stunningly handsome, long blonde hair, doesn't have that anymore, but you know. And it was just amazing. And over time, his sister and one of his brothers were at Livingston, and they were also wonderful with music. So it was a great experience. And Robert Lowell, the poet, also used to check in. And you know, at this point, and I'm reading everything I can, and I would sit in a room with Robert Lowell. There was one other English major who was an aide there, and we would just sit and just pick Lowell's brain about his poetry, and he would read it to us and explain what he meant by it. It was great. It was fabulous.
How about almost seeing Jim Morrison dying?
Oh, I was working at the Fillmore East as an usher, and the Doors were there. And then afterward, I think there was 2 shows. I'm not exactly sure, but at the end of it, Bill Graham, who was the main impresario of and Morrison and a few of the band, they were sitting in the front. And it was an old theater. It was about 3 stories high, one of the old Broadway theaters. And all of a sudden, Morrison and Graham, they're yelling at each other. And he's going, those lights could just crash down here and kill people in the audience. And Graham's going, you're crazy, Bill, or Jim. And Jim got up and he just kind of left. And about 10 minutes later, we're hearing this screaming. We look up and here's Morrison, and he's hanging from the lights up there. And he's going, you're right, Bill, these things are really pretty sturdy, you know, whatever. But I was afraid he was going to fall down and kill himself. He took another year. He killed himself in Paris, but, you know.
Tennessee Williams sitting 2 tables down at PJ
Well, this
Clark's.
was a great thing for my father, because he was a big reader, you know, and loved to write stuff and whatever. And Tennessee Williams was one of his heroes. And actually, I think it might have been the weekend where I won the Edgar. My dad and mother went to the thing. And then we went over to PJ Clark's that Sunday for lunch. And here, you know, like 2 tables away was Tennessee Williams. But my dad, I mean, he was just watching them, and that was enough. He wouldn't dare go over the table.
No?
Well, he wouldn't be rude. He would consider it to be very rude. But just watching him, you know, it was great. Ever
crossed paths with Epstein?
You know, I didn't know who he was at the time.
Right.
Yeah, briefly, in one of the outside one of the restaurants, and somebody who I knew. Well, this is, you know, Epstein, and you know, and I didn't pay attention to it. A friend of mine down here, Tim Malloy, was a journalist down here, and he knew the story. We had done a documentary, Murder of a Small Town, and we were thinking of maybe doing another documentary. And he told me the Epstein story. I said, this is insane. I mean, this billionaire and all these young girls, and I want to write a book on it. And I got a couple of investigators, you know, because there had been rumors about Trump and President Clinton, et cetera. And there was absolutely nothing involving Trump or President Clinton with Epstein in terms of anything that I would put in the book. And I wouldn't put anything in the book that I didn't, you know, 100% believe in. And I was on a plane at one point, and the woman sitting next to me, it turned out she ran the spa at Mar-a-Lago. And I said, did you ever run into Jeffrey Epstein there? She said, oh, yes. She said he wasn't a member, but he would come. And she said he was inappropriate with the young girls. And she said, I went to Mr. Trump, and Mr. Trump banned him that day. I mean, people are nuts in terms of, and they're so adamant about the stories. They go, well, everybody must have known in town that Epstein was. I'm going, why would you think that this guy would sit there spreading rumors that he was bringing 14-year-olds to his house? I mean, seriously, do you really think somebody would do that? Oh, you know, I have these 14-year-olds over all the time. And while we were writing the book, he got word that we were writing it, and I would get threats from his lawyers every couple of weeks.
What would they say?
Don't do this. We're going to sue you. Da 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 da. You're going to get your information wrong. And I knew we weren't. I knew we weren't because if I write a nonfiction book, I'm not going to put anything in there that I can't stand behind 100%. I know. So, and I knew everything in the book, and it wasn't just being scared of it. It was just, no, I'm not going to put anything in there that's just a rumor.
And then not only was a book, but then became a Netflix show.
Yeah.
Filthy Rich. How did you kind of avoid Madoff?
I have a guy who, Tony Pizer, does my investments and basically keeps my financial life reasonable, more than reasonable. That one really bad year, he said, you know, it's a bad year, but here's the one lucky thing. He said Madoff had come to us to invest. And he said, yeah, I looked, and I wanted some proof of how are you turning in these 12, 13% every, you know, and they wouldn't give us anything. So I said, there's no way we're going to invest with Madoff. So we didn't invest with Madoff, and a lot of people down here in Palm Beach did. But we had no interest in doing it because it was like, where are the numbers? I'm sorry. How are you delivering this 12% every year, whatever the hell it was?
Go to the office?
Huh?
Head to the office?
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
We'll reset for office tour.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey. Good. I hope you. Yeah. I think it went well.